evening and welcome to this December 9th City Council work session. And the first item of business is items or committee reports. And so do I have folks? I know Emily has one. Okay, take it away, Emily.
Thank you. This is a reiteration of many past comments, but because it's the last meeting, last Monday meeting for items, winter's here, it's getting colder, and we're really in the same position we were last year. We haven't had any new beds, and it's embarrassing, it's problematic. I know people are working on it, but the time frame is so urgent, and we're so far behind. And we're spending an awful lot of money chasing the protesters around town between Public Works and Hazmat and EPD and so on and so on. It's having a really big effect. And the solution is to have somewhere else for people to go. And we don't have that. So I'm concerned. And I don't really know how to make it go any better. I know everybody wants it to. But it's a crisis. People are sleeping on the sidewalk everywhere and almost getting run over, and we can't even provide a parking lot for people to lie down on without wasting our time giving tickets and citations. So it's urgent, and the work that's going on, I want to light a fire under it because people are cold. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Betty.
Oh, thank you. I did find my notes, so it's okay. Okay, first I have an announcement. I want to announce my retirement from council, effective in January of 2021, approximately 13 months from now.
Betty.
And I'm not trying to designate a successor. So,
You don't want me to be AIC?
Wow.
So I have some information from LRAPA, Lane Regional Air Protection Agency. We've talked a lot about at LRAPA about saying the whole thing instead of just LRAPA. Used to be Regional Pollution Control or something. We changed it some years ago to Lane Regional Air Protection Agency. And what they are involved in right now is Cleaner Air Oregon, which you've probably heard about. But it was started by the governor. The idea is to look not only at how much pollution is being produced, but the health effects of it, which a lot of people will be happy about. And I just want to read the one little paragraph from how it started and then tell you which industries have been chosen to look at first. Governor Brown created Cleaner Air Oregon in 2016, and the Environmental Quality Commission adopted the program into rules in November of 2018. At the March 2019 meeting, the LRAPA Board of Directors approved administrative changes to integrate Cleaner Air Oregon rules with existing program rules. And they require facilities to report toxic air contamination, emissions, assess potential health risks, and reduce risks that exceed basic standards. And the first 5, they can't do them all at once. There aren't enough employees to give extra looks at all the industries at once. So the first 5 that have been selected are Arauco North America in Eugene, International Paper in Springfield, J.H. Baxter in Springfield, Seneca Sustainable Energy, which is also in Springfield, I think, the Willamette Valley Company, LLC. And there will be quite a process of close looks at these industries in the first year of Cleaner Air Oregon. After that, there will be other groups. I did ask why they chose these. Part of it is I think, those are not their words exactly. Part of it, I think, is the number of complaints, but part of it is different permit writers have issued the permits for different industries. And it was decided not to give one person all the big load all at once. So those are the first ones that will be looked at. And I think a lot of people will be happy to know they're looking at health risks. And there will be, I could go through the whole procedure, but I don't think we need to do that right now. You can look on the web at Cleaner Air Oregon and LRAPA and learn a lot more about it if you want to. Thank you.
Thank you for that, and that was a stunning announcement. So how many years have you served on council?
It'll be 24 when this term ends, 23 now.
24 years. That is pretty astonishing public service.
Maybe I'll change my mind tomorrow.
Maybe you'll change your mind. All right. Okay, well, all right, there's still time. All right, Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. Betty and I were just actually having this back and forth upstairs and down here. And last week, she and I like to needle each other from time to time. We don't often agree, but she's coming around. But you just shocked me, too. And the Register Guard doesn't often attend our meetings anymore, but they often watch these. So in case there's like a reporter person who's going to write about this watching, the longest serving city councilor did so for 20 years and 6 months. Betty will have served 24 when she's done by a long shot, given more service to the council than anyone ever has in the history of the city. And that's just stunning in and of itself. But I'm glad that you will be around with us for the next 13 months. But
Thank you.
That was a very shocking statement. Wow, I'm a little stunned, so. She got the last laugh on me because we were just needling each other back and forth on this. She did that to have some fun.
He's going to try to beat the record.
Oh, we'll see about that. We'll see about that. Yeah.
Oh, all right. Any other folks needing to make a comment? All right, great. I think, wow, that kind of knocked the wind in my eyes. Thank you. All right, we're ready
Mic
for the
drop for
item.
sure. It was a mic drop for sure.
It was, yeah. All right, Town Square project update.
Right. We'll just bring the team up. Will's going to kick it off with the project team and
you can have this. Okay, thank you. I'm Will Dowdy in Community Development. And I'm here to give you another update on the town square. I'm here with Francesca Gambetti, our owner's representative, and introducing Ian Gelbrick, a partner at FFA and the design lead on the architecture for this project. The last time we were here, Sarah described our approach as a path marked by a series of rock cairns, a course with easily anticipated milestones. Today, I'm here to introduce decisions about City Hall that will be critical for the project to move forward. We'll come back in a few weeks to ask you for your direction on these topics, and the team will take that information and use it to develop the initial designs with cost estimates that we'll bring back to you in the spring. So that's what we're trying to do today. Before I go into more detail, I've asked Francesca to give you a quick update on the rest of the project.
it's going. It's all.
I don't need to do anything? Okay. Thanks. We've actually made a lot of great progress in the few weeks that have passed since we were here last. Probably one of the more exciting pieces of news that we have to report is that we now have a complete core project team with the addition of a contractor that we selected last week. We had a great process. 4 very qualified firms submitted proposals, and we went through a selection process, including interviews, and have selected Lee Scratcher Lewis as the contractor to join our project team. So this is great news, A, because they're a fantastic local firm with great relevant experience, and it's just really exciting for us to be able to have them early in the design phase to join our team and guide us through cost estimating and evaluations of different options, constructability reviews as we progress the design of the Town Square project. We've also started quite a bit of site due diligence. We have site survey work going on, geotech to start shortly. And we've had a number of kind of kickoff meetings with the design teams, different user groups, city representatives, getting the design teams up and running to get the designs going. And we've also started, we had initial conversations with regards to the 1% for Art program and laying out a schedule and process for that, which will kick off in early next year as we identify what art opportunities would exist on the site and start a process to identify artists to fulfill that program. So those are the key updates over the last few weeks.
So, as I said, the intent of the rest of this meeting is to talk with you about defining the City Hall part of the town square. There are a few decisions that will lay a foundation for moving forward with City Hall. And there on the screen here, there's a lot of text up there. The intent is to go through these a little bit more detail. In general, what they have to do with is how big the building should be, how efficient it should be, and how resilient. As we've been talking with Ian and the rest of the team about the project, we've emphasized the importance of the City Hall cost, construction schedule, and quality. But until we can give them the answers to these questions, they're not able to do the work necessary to give us the information we're looking for. In the same way that it'd be impossible to say how much dinner will cost until you know what's on the menu and how many people you're trying to feed. The sooner we can have this information to the team, the more efficiently they'll be able to do their work. We're not expecting that you'll want to make all of these decisions at this session, and that's why we're planning on returning back in the early part of next year for an opportunity for you to provide us with the direction that we'll need in order if we're going to stay on the schedule that we've planned out. So the first one of these that I want to talk about has to do with the integration of other functions into the City Hall. The direction that I need to give to the design team and that I'll then need from you is, do you want to build additional floors of leasable real estate beyond the needs of the City Hall? If so, there's a follow-up question about what type of use that should be. And then, do you want the council chamber and work session room to be designed to double as flexible community gathering spaces? Before getting into these, I want to take a quick step back. Because the starting premise of the town square is that the civic functioning of Eugene is interwoven with commercial, artistic, environmental, and cultural functioning. The town square puts these pieces together, with public space, market facilities, and a city hall working together and in concert with Lane County and a plethora of private properties and businesses. It's no surprise that we've heard from a number of people that they'd like to see if that same diverse and multidisciplinary activation can exist within the City Hall itself. Drawing from this input, we've begun to explore this in two ways: combining the City Hall with other uses and integrating other uses within City Hall. There's a little bit of a difference there that I'll lay out in more detail. So first, this is about combining the City Hall with other uses. So for me personally, my background is in urban design and architecture. There's a strong attraction to what is called vertical mixed use. That's stacking one function, such as residential or private office, on top of another. In this case, that would be above the City Hall. Cities thrive when they bring these different uses into close proximity. The same outcome also is achieved by horizontal mixed use, a term for saying that different buildings can do different things and participate together in part of the urban ensemble. The benefit of a vertical mixed-use approach is that the site does more, and the building can be active at different hours of the week. The same building can be active. A couple of considerations. If we build something that involves a development partner, whether a for-profit or nonprofit development partner, our project, especially the schedule, will have to adjust to align with their process, including their funding cycles. Also, there are qualities of our City Hall project: prevailing wage, green building targets, possibly seismic standards, that could make a partnership with the city on this site less competitive and more expensive than it would be for them to build without us on a different site nearby. Our downtown policies support diverse development, and we will continue to look for opportunities to support additional horizontal mixed use. The question for you is whether you want to build additional floors of leasable real estate beyond the needs of City Hall on this as part of this project. The architects will need this information because it will impact the foundation and structural systems of the building, the vertical circulation and fire safety, and the configuration of first floor and entrances. So that's the first part of that question. On to the community rooms. Integrating other uses within City Hall is about looking for ways to get more functionality from the parts of the building that we already intend to build. There's a need for more community gathering spaces, whether it's for committee meetings or musical performances, senior programming, or family events. FFA has suggested to us that the council chamber and work session room in the new City Hall could be designed to double as spaces that are available for other public uses. The benefits include addressing additional public need within the project scope, adding further hours of activation to the building, and expanding the sense of City Hall as a welcoming and truly civic building. Considerations include the ongoing operational logistics of moving furniture before and after meetings, and the management of these spaces. We would like your direction on whether the council chamber and work session room should be designed to double as flexible community gathering spaces. This information is not as critical as the previous one, but the architects will need this because it will impact access and internal circulation and furniture and storage. So that's running through the first one's a double one. Next one's a little more straightforward. So topic 2 is parking, specifically underground parking. The decision here is, do you want the town square to include underground parking beneath the farmers market and City Hall? If yes, there's a follow-up question about how much. Throughout the concept design, we frequently talked with our stakeholders about parking, and the comments varied widely. Some people thought that parking needed to be a high priority as it expands the accessibility of the town square and makes it an easier destination for more people to reach. Others thought that parking needed to be minimized since the town square is primarily a walking experience and priority needs to be given to active transportation options. We shared 3 options for on-street parking, one that removed most of what is there today, one that was a modest reduction, and one that kept it in its current quantities. The most popular option for the on-street parking was the modest reduction on Park Street, 8th, and Oak. Similarly, we explored and shared options for underground parking. If you were at the July event, you probably saw me standing next to the board and talking to many people about underground parking. The conversation typically started in the same place. There's currently underground parking on the site. Is that something that can be saved? Cameron McCarthy's team looked into this for us, and here's what they found. If you're familiar with the lower level of the butterfly lot, you know that much of it, particularly the north end, is only slightly below the sidewalk grade. In other words, to get a true layer of underground parking, it still requires significant excavation and construction. We asked them to look at 2 different options. One would be a single level of underground parking, approximately 100 spaces, and the other would be 2 levels, approximately 200 spaces. Their cost estimator found that the construction efficiencies were minimal, and the cost was essentially the same as it would be for the city to build underground parking on any other downtown site. So with the hard cost and soft cost, it's about $90,000 a parking space, or $9 million for 100 spaces and $18 million for 200 spaces. We shared this information with the city's parking team, who continues to explore new options for downtown parking. They've found that construction of public above-ground garages, like the Pearl Street garage, it's about half the cost, approximately $40,000 per space, and that model can yield 250 spaces or so on a quarter block. The parking staff has worked on mapping out the geographic distribution of parking. So here I've got a map for you. The town square is in the middle. The yellow circle is about a 5-minute walk for the average person, roughly a quarter mile. Most of our older parking structures, the Overpark, the Parkade, and the Holt Center garage, are all within a block or 2 of the town square. More recently, the focus has been more decentralized. The Broadway garages have increased the capacity on the west side of downtown. The newly leased parking, public parking that's now available in the 13th and Olive garage creates more opportunity on the south side. And the new MGO shuttle helps provide easy access between these locations and other destinations. The parking team is currently focused on addressing demand on the east side of downtown, identifying that area as the part of the system most clearly lacking resources. The benefits of building underground parking are the easy access it provides to people from around the region and the one-to-one replacement of the existing amenity. One consideration is the opportunity cost. How else could $9 to $18 million be used to support parking downtown? And another is the impact to the project schedule. And this is something I didn't mention earlier, but incorporating parking underneath the farmers market block would make our current schedule impossible. It would likely displace the farmers market for a year and delay the grand opening until spring of 2022. We would like your direction on whether the town square should include underground parking beneath the farmers market and City Hall. The architects need this decision before they can design the building foundations and structures, and if they also need to know if they need to allocate space on that ground floor for the underground access. And we also need this decision so that we can determine our final project schedule and coordinate with the Lane County Farmers Market about the upcoming seasons. So those are the first two topics. I'm going to turn it over to Francesca to talk about the next one.
Great. So this question has to do with sustainability. Should the City Hall be designed in keeping with the current standard of achieving LEED Silver certification? We're really looking forward to hearing your comments on that and thoughts. Our current working assumption is that we would work to achieve that that threshold, so LEED Silver, but always look for cost-effective opportunities to exceed it. So we would evaluate both initial upfront costs for sustainable features as well as longer-term operational costs. And again, look for cost-effective ways to exceed whatever standard is set for the project. Dovetailing with this is also the state's 1.5% green energy technology requirement. So 1.5% of the construction cost of City Hall needs to be invested in green energy, which could be some photovoltaics. The program's actually changing now and will also allow battery storage and other sustainable features. So we do have that requirement that we'll have to meet, and we'll be exploring some good ways of doing that. We're also coordinating with city's climate staff and facilities staff to make sure we're in alignment with the Climate Action Plan and other city programs that are underway. We've got a great team that with a lot of LEED experience, from the contractors to the designers. We also have a sustainability consultant in Brightworks that is on our design team. And they're guiding us through a integrated sustainability approach. We've already had a good workshop event with them to explore opportunities for the site. We'll be looking at environmental health, so maximizing energy performance, minimizing water usage, improving air quality, and selecting materials that will minimize carbon emissions. And then we'll also be taking really a holistic approach and looking at social equity and economic prosperity opportunities as well with the site. So again, what we'll be looking for is cost-effective ways to maximize the sustainability of the Town Square project. There's a lot of different programs out there that we could follow. LEED is certainly one of the best known ones. There are It's a longstanding program that's well recognized nationally and internationally, has very clear and easily communicate. It is very clear and can be easily communicated between everyone on the project team, and just has very clear objective criteria for the project team to follow. So it's a common and logical program for a public agency to follow.
And then I've asked Ian to talk a little bit about the seismic standards.
Oh, thank you. So I get the really exciting topic. So when we're designing new buildings of any kind, we're looking at seismic standards, and there's a lot of different metrics that you can use when sort of making that evaluation. What's up on the screen right now is probably the most descriptive in different ways of identifying to what level of seismic performance you want to design to. So on the left is life safety, which means in the event of an earthquake, that the building performs well enough that everybody gets out safely. And for the vast majority of buildings being designed today, regardless of their function, that is what everyone is designing to. So any office building, any sort of typical construction is being built to that standard. The next option is immediate occupancy, which means that after the earthquake, you can go back in and start using the building immediately. And that's generally reserved for public safety facilities, fire stations, police stations, and EOC. It's to a point that in the event of an earthquake, there needs to be people in there doing their jobs. The last one is known as operational, which means that nothing really changed after the event of an earthquake, which is a pretty dramatic thing to imagine. And so the lists up there correspond to levels, specific levels within the building code that you have to follow. So in the building code, there are risk categories 1 through 4, and they equate loosely to the things that are up on the screen. So risk category 1 is farm buildings and things like that, that in the event of an earthquake, they're most likely going to collapse because there's nobody in them, and you don't design to that level. Risk category 2 is life safety, which means that everybody can get out safely, but you're not likely to go back in anytime soon. And it's going to take significant repair, and it may even get to the point where it may be cheaper to rebuild than it is to repair the building. There's a risk category 3, which is reserved for high occupancy buildings. So by example, if you were rebuilding the Holt Center, you would design it to risk category 3 because there's a lot of people in a small amount of space that need to get out. The other aspect of risk category 3 is that it may be more likely to repair that building than it is to scrap it and start over. Risk category 4 is immediate occupancy, again, reserved for essential facilities. There is no risk category 5. The code does not have a provision for operational, which is what's up there now. It really is reserved for extreme functions that don't change. So by example, things like Department of Defense facilities or incredibly critical utility infrastructure that have control systems, that's the sort of level of, operational. So, any questions relative to that?
MEP.
Right. So in the life safety event, MEP is considered non-functioning. The critical systems are like lighting to get you out of the building. Oh, sorry. MEP is mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems. In the immediate occupancy, critical systems are up and running, like mechanical systems and lighting. You have emergency generator, emergency backup that allows you to get back in the building and put it to use. In the operational setting, none of that, again, has changed. The mechanical systems, electrical systems are all up and running all the time without change.
You want to talk about the cost real quick?
Sure. So, as we mentioned before, the vast majority of buildings that are being built right now are at the life safety standard. And generally, the design costs are considered baseline, and so are the construction costs. There isn't really a significant impact to, we're all designed to that point anyway. With the immediate occupancy, the structural engineers have to do a lot more work, and we have a lot more coordination time with them. And what they normally tell us is that just from a construction standpoint, the structural costs go up about 20% of the overall building when you go to immediate occupancy. In addition to that, the mechanical electrical systems have to be to a higher grade. They often have to be what's called shake tested. So the mechanical units have to be put on a shake table and tested and certified to be able to function during an earthquake or after an earthquake. And again, operational is kind of off the charts relative to what the actual cost would be. We'd have to work closely with our contracting partners to determine that.
So the intention tonight, as I said, is to hit you with a lot of information and to open up a number of different conversations or topics of discussion so that you can ask us the questions that you need. We can bring back more information so that we can come back to you and so that you're equipped to make decisions on these things. As you can see, these are consequential decisions. They're best made at the beginning of a project because they really will shape what kind of project it is that we're talking about. They'll have some pretty serious design implications and as well as funding and cost implications. So we're here today introducing. We hope to come back in the early part of next year for you to give us direction on these topics. That's going to get the design team off and running on the early City Hall design. In the middle of that time, sometime around March or April, we intend to be back here to talk about the other two parts of the town square. That's the farmers market and the park blocks. We will have some refined designs as well as cost estimates and funding options, funding strategy for those. So, and what we'll do at that time is ask you whether you want us to carry on with the design drawings. And so that'll be an important check-in point. And if you want us to carry on, we'll take those design drawings all the way through a bid set and come back with real prices. The City Hall is a couple months behind, or a month or two behind. And so we'll have a similar conversation in April or May, where we've got some refined drawings and enough to be able to get an initial price and bring that to you and find out from you what you think of that and whether we are on a target or not. And at which point we would be looking for, again, the direction to keep going with the design all the way to getting a bid. We anticipate being able to have bids for you to review in summer, fall for the Park Blocks and Farmers Market, and fall, winter for the City Hall. When we bring those bids back, that's the opportunity to get final direction on whether to start construction or not. If everything goes well and everything looks good, then we will anticipate having construction completed on the Park Block and Farmers Market in time for the markets to open in spring of 2021. And then the City Hall would be about a year behind that in 2022. So we are ready to repeat anything that we have said, and we are also ready to answer any questions that you may have. We look forward to your discussion and hearing what you want to know from us. Thank you.
Mayor, before you open it up, I'll just add is that last slide up there? Maybe one last slide. So there are a lot of decisions to make, and we didn't want to push you into having to make any one of them tonight as you're just getting information. But we do have motions prepared, so if there are some things that are on this list that you just already know, we aren't going to want to do that, or we are going to want to do that, you could take action on any of those tonight, and we'll be prepared to support that.
Great. So I have Mike, Alan, Claire, Betty, Emily, and Chris. Okay. All right, Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. My thoughts on this location as the appropriate City Hall location aren't much of a secret, so I won't belabor that too much. I do still think this is 180 degrees the wrong direction for our community. However, despite that, this is what the council majority is doing. The last time we had a serious discussion about City Hall, we started with a budget conversation, knowing we had $18 million, and it devolved into, hey, well, what if? And what if evolved into a values conversation, and that came back with our price tag of 30,000 square feet and $28 million. Now, I would like to encourage my colleagues to please, please, please consider not making that same mistake again. I think it was hard on our city manager, and it was us that put him in that position. I would hate to do the same thing to Sarah. I would encourage us not to say, well, we'll just work out both of them as we go, because I think we're going to find ourselves in the same difficulty. I know that we have, I'm going to need correction on the exact numbers, but $11, $12 million in facilities reserved for this. We have the capacity to cobble together a few more. Maybe we could get to 20 million in what we know we have access to. So construction costs have gone up dramatically since the last time we had this conversation. So if we were to say, okay, 30,000 square feet, all one building, and make the same choices as last time, life safety or the lowest earthquake readiness, no on-site parking or underground parking, we know that it's going to come back, if we're going to build 30,000 square feet, significantly more than $28 million. I'd say, and this is just me guessing, but it'd probably get us closer to 40. And we haven't had any conversation about how we're going to pay for that. I would encourage us to consider having a conversation first about our budget and what number we will not go beyond in the building of this, and allow that to drive. When I brought that subject up before, we've had many, I remember Chris talking about this, hey, yeah, we're going to compromise the values we've talked about having in this before, because we know we need to be able to make something reasonable and be able to afford it. But I'd hate to see us going down this decision of we're going to decide on these or other values and then wait and see next year what the cost is. We'll be in the same boat we were before, and it'll be a huge number, and the community will react very badly. So I hope we will consider stalling off on some of these decisions and maybe having a conversation about budget first. And could you put me down for a second round, please, Mayor?
Okay, Alan.
Yeah, so none of these issues that are up here are new to us. We've all heard all about them for the last go around on this and this time as well. And we've been looking at this for a very long time. I don't think any of this is news to any of us. And I understand what you're saying, Mike, but these are decisions that create the budget. So we need to say, these are the things we want, then you create the budget, then you figure out, and you create the funding plan, and then you move forward. So the reality is, yeah, it's going to cost $25 to $28 million to build this kind of building. We have waited several years, and that has increased the cost of this project dramatically, probably $3 or $4 million by the time we get to it all, by just waiting. So that's on us. And we should be operating on the basis that that's going to be the budget for it. And we need to come up with a funding plan. We probably have about $15 million, $15.5 million in hand. And so there's other mechanisms to get there, like urban renewal, to get the other 10 million to get us there, or 12. So I know how I would vote on all of these. And waiting on and having more conversation about this is just costing us more money. So my suggestion, Mayor, is that we go through each one of these and do a motion, yes, no, on each of these as we go forward. And if there's something that people need in terms of more information, then besides cost, because that's what a yes vote would mean. Yes, bring this back and tell me what this would look like and what it would cost. So my suggestion is we go through each one of these and make a motion, so we don't do what we did last time, which is head nods, and that we get affirmative direction to staff to move forward.
Okay, so let's have a general conversation, and then we'll go through that process, which makes sense for clarity. Well, we can discuss that. We can discuss it. So it's open. The floor is still open. Okay, Claire.
Thank you. Excuse me. Yeah, I'll probably need more information on some things before I'd be ready to vote on motion. So I appreciate staff setting us up to have the conversation and coming back early next year, perhaps to pass motions. I do agree that these particular questions, answering those obviously informs the cost. But I kind of feel like it would be helpful to back up a little bit, and I definitely have some sympathy to what Councilor Clark is speaking to in terms of having a budget. So it is a little bit of a challenge of the chicken and the egg situation, but you know, I don't know if we should revisit the values that inform the prior design. It's a different space. It's a different council to some extent. There are members here who were not here when we had that discussion. I wasn't even part of the values discussion. That started before I joined council. So I don't know if we want to revisit that, or if we could just get some more detail on, you know, if we just did the bare bones needs of this building, you know, the council chamber, a lobby, offices, meeting space, restrooms, you know, what could we project some costs there? Because that would help us with the conversation that Mike is asking us to have, which I think is important. I do not want to be in the position we were before, where we had some ideas, designers went off, they came back with this pretty fancy building that they were going to build for us that we decided was not within our budget. So that was a lot of work that didn't go anywhere. I might need a second round. So on the question of leasing, I would need information on the viability of us actually getting tenants if we decided to create office space that we would lease out. I know downtown is filling up, and you know, it might be competitive for us to do that, but I'd like to know that, you know, versus what would the income be from that versus the additional cost of building those additional floors. One thing I could vote on today is the question around community space. I absolutely think our space should be one that can accommodate community use. We might end up using it all ourselves with all of our committee meetings and other things that we do. But even in that context, having that flexibility for our own meetings would be important to me. And then the parking, underground parking would be great. It sounds prohibitively expensive for the benefit. I wonder what Lane County is thinking about in terms of how long their flat lot's going to be available. I'm not sure if they even allow public parking there. And I'll take a second round.
Gotcha. All right, Betty.
Thank you. Okay, while it's happening, I think it should be done right. I think underground parking is very desirable and should be a part of the project. As for community use, I'm all for it. When we had the council chamber, other groups did use it frequently. And sometimes people use the Magnet Room too. But the big council chamber should definitely be available for other groups. And I don't know how that would work, whether there would be a charge or what, or I don't even know whether we charged for our old council chamber, but I know that I've been to other meetings there. And it's good for the community. It's also good for having people around at night. As for people using a shuttle, which is very nice, but I don't think it runs at night, that new free shuttle. If there should be a way for people to get to meetings at night, get away from meetings at night as well as to get there. In the dark and the rain, it's different from, a block is different in the dark, rainy time, and then it is on the bright sunshine. Environmental sustainability, whatever that means, I think it should certainly be considered. It means different things to different people. And seismic, I think life safety would be adequate. I don't know whether it should be better than that or not, but that's something to discuss. But underground parking definitely, I think, should be a consideration. It's, we're short of parking already. I still think we should have free parking. And if we had free parking on Oak Street, for example, all those meters are empty all the time. If we had free parking there, people could park there and walk downtown in the daytime easily. But now we have meters that nobody uses, which must cost money to maintain. And it's also unfriendly. When I first came to Eugene in 1979, one of the nicest things I saw was signs saying, "Welcome to downtown, park free." I thought that is very friendly. And you could park free actually anywhere you could find a space. And I think that, I still think we should go back to that. Thank you.
Okay, Emily.
Thank you. I guess I have some small questions and comments about this. The additional floors of leasable real estate is a new consideration for me, and I'm a little confused since we're already renting office space all around town. Would we be able to rent our new space for more than we're renting our present space? Because unless we're going to make money off of it, why rent it? Why not just use it? Maybe we could get the fourth floor of the library empty so we can put all maker stuff in there, which is all ready to go. So I'm really a little leery of building offices when we already don't have enough. I kind of see the idea of mixing up different topics in a building, and yet we also talk about the frustration of having to walk throughout downtown to get to another office. And maybe we'd like to get the courthouse so we could put all those offices over there. So this idea is just a little odd to me. If it was housing up there, that seems even odder. The chamber and work session for community gathering, I urgently want that. since before I was on council. We are just missing the boat here. These rooms are heated and cooled year-round, and this particular room is empty the majority of the time. And we could offer for free to nonprofits. We could charge some money for, things that would pay money, and then we could maybe pay for those offices upstairs. But I think it's critical that if we're going to have a town square, we use the space we're building to the maximum capacity we can. People say, we're building a gold ivory tower for us. Well, if we make it so everyone can use it, that makes it a little easier. I'd love to have underground parking, but it means a lot of digging down because it's not a great deep space. And I'm very concerned about the expense of that, and also the delay in time, because the longer we wait, the more expensive it will be. So do we want to take, that time and more money and make the whole project even more? I don't think I want to. Climate, but again, how much can we afford? What's the trade-off? What will we get? Obviously, it has to be to life safety, and anything we could add to that, great, but this doesn't have, the command center of our electricity. I'm looking forward to talking about this some more. Thank you for everything you've done.
Okay, Chris.
Thank you. Really appreciate the way you framed this in the presentation. It makes it much easier to kind of talk about it. I completely agree with the notion that we have to have parallel discussions around how much money we can put into this project versus what it is we want to get out of it. And I think they're both essential. What do I want it to do? How much is it going to cost? They have to be parallel conversations. Then I think we can do that. I'm not necessarily interested in redoing the value work. It may be that if we can summarize and share the value work that was done before and people can have a chance to look at it, then if we want to talk about it again, we can certainly do that. But that was good work, and I think a lot of that could carry over because it wasn't building specific. The notion that we've already got Lise Crutcher Lewis on board, are we thinking we might go down a CMGC kind of route on this?
Yes, we are. We have them on board as a CMGC.
Good. That would definitely be a cost savings to do it that way. To go through the list here, and I agree, I'm not ready to make any motions, but I do think I can, give you what my preferences would be here, and I think that's what others have been doing as well. Do I want to build additional floors? All of the reasons that Emily just brought up, I think, are also important, but the one that would also be significant to me is the added complexity of doing that. One of the concerns I have with the whole City Hall conversation over the last several years has been every time we make this more complex, it slows it down, delays it, and blocks it. And so I want to try to keep this short and simple. And so if I can kiss this thing, then we can actually make progress. And to me, putting rentable floors on it and doing that adds additional level of complexity. Parking also adds a level of complexity to this, particularly a $9 million level of complexity that I think could just also really slow this project down. So I would look for an alternative to that if it's at all possible. Do I want the council chamber work session room to be doubled? From what I've heard, that's a duh. I mean, I think everybody here wants to be able to do that. I think that would make the building much more usable, particularly in the downtown area. Underground parking, I've already mentioned that. Environmental sustainability, we have committed ourselves to being as sustainable as we can. So I think at the very least we want to try to achieve the LEED Silver certification. And if there can be cost-effective ways to go beyond that, I'm perfectly happy and encouraging to do that. I will say that with regard to seismic standards, I've been attending a number of meetings and conferences talking about the earthquake that is coming. Not an if, it's a when. And the challenge will be, when that earthquake comes, there are going to be very few buildings downtown that will be able to be occupied. I mean, the current standard we build to is you can get out of it safely, but that building is then unusable. And so if you look at downtown after a major event and there are no buildings that you can use, that's kind of a world of hurt, except for a fire station or two. So I think at the very least, we need to build this to an essential facility. I'm not looking to have all the MEPs operating. I mean, I'm assuming we can bring in generators, we can do things like that, but the building needs to be usable, because after that major earthquake, you may be going 2 or 3 years before you can get downtown rebuilt. And if there's no buildings downtown that are usable, that's much more difficult than at least having 1 or 2 that are usable. So I think at the very least, we should look at the costs for making this building at an essential facility level. Because I think that could, particularly for a public building, I think that would be an extremely valuable thing to have. I don't want to build a, oh, sorry. I don't want to build an expensive building and then just tear it down.
You can have a second if you want one.
No, I'm good.
Okay. All right, Jennifer.
Thank you. Well, thanks again. This was a great presentation. As always, you guys always do a great job of organizing everything. So starting at the top, I have to agree with Emily. I actually wrote that down as well. If we're using this for this, what are we giving up that we might need for the city? Unless someone can come back with a really great reason why we should do this, it doesn't seem like it makes sense to have real estate attached to our city hall. Like Chris said, the second one, yes, we want to use flexible space as much as we can. I was actually really into the underground parking until I read this, and you changed my mind. I think it makes a lot more sense that if we are going to build a parking structure, it looks like we need one on the east side of downtown, and it sounds like it's a lot better cost effective to do something above ground than to build it in. So I'm sold. This, it seems like it makes a lot of sense and brings down the cost of our city hall, sorry. The environmental sustainability stuff, I'm all about environmental sustainability, but like Mike, I'm very concerned about the budget, and I would rather have a number to start with and then kind of like see how much I can squeeze in there than to start like just having this, you know, oh, I want all this stuff, because I do want all this stuff, but I know I can't necessarily afford it. But when you guys bring back the costs for some of that stuff, I know some of them might actually pay for themselves as they go along. Like solar panels, often you get a return on your investment. So having that information for me would be helpful, because I can make, yeah, while there's this big upfront cost, look, at 15 years, I'm going to pay for it. So maybe I'm willing to spend a little more on that, because I know it's going to come out in the end. I actually agree with Chris on the seismic standards. You know, while it's not our emergency command center, we are going to need space to get stuff done and for people to be there and to gather. And if we can afford it, there again, depending on what our budget is, I would rather go with a little bit higher level of facility occupancy after a disaster. And I like Chris's idea of sharing the value work, because I also was not here, and while I kind of have a general idea of it, being able to see more comprehensive information I think would be helpful, so I know what we're talking about.
Okay, thank you. I have several counselors asking for a second round, and I just wanted to jump in and make a few comments or ask a couple of questions myself. So the LEED certification, when you did that, I mean, there's a very sort of specific criteria, and when you did the city hall, the last version of the city hall, we have some of that data about what some of these things cost to do, right? From the previous iteration. Give us a ballpark in the next round.
We have both things that we've looked at in the past, but I think also probably just as relevant is the work that our team is working on other projects and elsewhere.
Right. So that just to be sort of clear about this, as we get these preferences here, it will be possible in the next round to actually have some dollars attached so that we can see we'll have some idea, right?
I think the question on the sustainability is also, there's real costs associated with getting the certification. It's fairly cumbersome. I mean, the paperwork and the managing the whole process. So I don't know if, I guess it'd be helpful to hear whether, is there any consideration of requiring less than LEED Silver, or is it just whether you would require more?
I'm just going to jump in here. Right now, what direction I've given is to the extent possible, just go with whatever is the adopted council policy right now until you direct us to do something different, and that's your adopted policy right now is to go with LEED Silver. So that's, we won't go less than that unless you direct one way or the other.
Yeah.
And similarly with the project values, we know that a lot of work went into those in terms of the City Hall building, but we've also been approaching this as a town square project. And the town square project has a set of values that until we get into the specifics of the design of the building, that's kind of driving the overall values of the project for now. Does that make sense? And if we want, Will can remind us of what those are.
And on the seismic, thank you for that, that helps. And on the seismic question, there are other cities, a lot of cities in California that presumably have dealt with their public buildings and their seismic standards. Is there, typically, are they at this immediate occupancy standard? Can you say, is that possible?
I think it varies from city to city, depending on what their goals and intent is. More often than not, it's tied to whether or not they have an EOC as part of their component, and how the City Hall sort of factors into their emergency protocols. So if you have something else identified as your EOC, this may have other functions during it as part of your emergency protocol, but wouldn't be necessarily your command center.
Right. Yeah, I think that Chris's comments resonate with me because I also have been going to a lot of those earthquake seminars, and the real message is it's not what happens in the earthquake, it's the years after the earthquake, and you actually need a place to sort of do that kind of decision-making and oversight. That feels like a pretty critical decision for the council to make. Okay, I have Mike, Claire, Alan, and Betty for second rounds.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to reiterate, no earthquake standard or life safety, no underground parking, LEED Silver certified, 30,000 square feet. The number years ago was $28 million. Those are all the same values that we voted on before. That's what got us the $28 million number. I think that number will be a lot closer to 40 coming back to us now. So if we're not willing to do without LEED certified silver, we can pretty much guarantee that number. What I'm saying is I couldn't disagree with Alan more. I thank those of you that said the same or similar thing or inclined to agree. We're sending a horrible message to the community, and this is going to be another acrimonious conversation if we don't say this is as much money as we're willing to spend, here's where we're going to get it, and whatever we can get for that is what we're going to get. If we say we're going to talk about all these ideas and come back with costs months from now before they're very specific, and that number ends up huge, we'll be in the exact same problem we were in before. I think it's a horrible way to conduct the process. I really hope we can consider doing it differently. That aside, I'm going to just say this because I know we probably will. We've had the conversation at this table. But I want to speculate for a second. Let's say we go along this route of talking both about these values and what the costs may be, and we'll talk about how we can save money in this process too, and how we can be wise along the way and try and do them both at the same time. Again, I think it's unwise, but we might do that. And let's say we come back a year from now, and the specific number after all of that work is $45 million, and we don't know how we're going to pay for that. That doesn't count phase two. And if we're not going to build a phase two, let's just say so right now, because that's going to be $60 or $70 million. And that means we're going to pay rent forever, which is currently $1.5 million a year. Let's be honest about the cost of that and factor it into the cost per square foot, because it's going to be expensive. Here's my plea. I know we want to take the eWeb option off the table. I know there's a majority who've said that out loud. I'm begging you, please don't, with eWeb, take this option off the table before a specific cost comes back to us. Because if we get to the point where we can't afford it and we don't know how, and we tell the community, sorry, we already took the option off the table for anything else, I hesitate to think what that will will bring in terms of public response. Thank you.
Okay, Claire.
Thank you. So on the parking, I started to say, I know it's not a lot of spots, but Lane County currently has their surface parking where our old city hall was. And Councilor Evans has a work session poll out to discuss the potential for a convention center, which would also require a consideration of additional parking. So I'm just throwing that out there to say maybe there are other ways and strategies we can look at creating more parking downtown that don't involve spending $9 million on 100 spaces under our city hall lot. Although I totally agree with Councilor Taylor about her comment about leaving the building on a cold, rainy, dark night, and that walking a block is a lot different than doing it during the day. On the sustainability, so Alan was muttering under his breath here that we've had this for 20 years. It's been our policy to do LEED certification. Can I get confirmation of that? Have all of the buildings we've built in the last 20 years met LEED silver?
I kind of want to nod my head, but I think we should wait and have
Yeah,
Jeff
if you
Perry
can
come back on that one.
confirm.
Yeah.
Because obviously I want our building to incorporate sustainable practices and sustainable building design. I question the cost of being able to put that LEED thing on the side of the building. How much is that worth to us to be able to put up a plaque that said the LEED program certified our building? What if we certified our building ourselves? So I know that might be like heresy, but I think it's worth discussing. I think we have a tight budget situation. I think we need to be mindful of how we're approaching that. I think we can build a green building that meets our community values and does a good return on investment, but I don't know if that means we have to go through a LEED process. So I think we should have a discussion about that. On the seismic, when we had that discussion way back when, I advocated strongly for the immediate occupancy, and I lost, and I was very frustrated by that because I felt like we just voted to build a building that was going to be destroyed and wouldn't be useful after that earthquake. So I'm glad to hear that there's more folks at the table considering, you know, how does that extra 20% compare to the cost of rebuilding the building and not having it available for how many years it would take to rebuild? So that's, I think, a question we need to grapple with. And as far as phase 2, you know, I think that depends somewhat on what the county is able to do with their lot. And if this, you know, courthouse building becomes available, we've talked about that as potentially being phase 2. And there is also the possibility that we could end up purchasing one of the buildings that we are currently renting space in, such as the Wells Fargo building. You know, that's been discussed in the past. I don't think it's for sale right now, but I think there are other potentials out there besides just saying we're just going to have to rent forever.
Okay, Alan.
And some of our rent is really, really cheap. It actually would cost a lot more to actually not rent than and buy than it would be to rent, because some of our dollars per square foot is really cheap, and which is a good thing. It also keeps the downtown full. On the budget, 30,000 square foot building. Right now, you're in the residential sector, $300 a square foot. But when we looked at comparable buildings, we were talking about $800 to $900 a square foot. When we looked at comparable city halls, that's times 30,000 square feet is $27 million. That's what we came up with. It hasn't changed that much. $45 million building would be $1,500 a square foot, which would make it the most expensive building in Oregon. So I don't think that's the budget. On terms of community uses, absolutely, there's a desperate need for more community meeting space in Eugene, and so we definitely should be doing that. On the leasable space, I agree with Chris. No, we need to keep it simple. It's going to increase the capital cost, which is one of the stumbling blocks we have. It's going to delay the project and other projects that are going to be problematic for us. So no on the lease space. On the underground parking, nice to have, but at $9 million, that's crazy. There's lots of nearby parking. If you just add up the number on the slide that they showed us, there's 2,500 spaces within 5-minute walking distance of the new City Hall project. So maybe we can spend some money on lighting and pathways and making that more appealable, safer, and spend a lot less than $9 million so we can make that all work a little bit better. On LEED Silver, yeah, it's been our policy for as long as I've been on the council and way before that, I think, to have all of our buildings be the minimum standard of LEED Silver. I can't believe we would even have a conversation that we would now go back on that. And the thing about the sustainability cost is, yes, it does have an impact on capital cost, but the reason you do them is because it lowers your operating cost. To ask about the only the capital costs associated with making a sustainable building is only asking half the question. The other half of the question is, what do you save? We're going to have operating costs in this building for 50 to 100 years. We're only going to have capital costs once. The net present value of comparing those two things is often a no-brainer. And so when you talk about the overall length of this building, how long it's going to operate, making it as efficient as possible is actually a very, very smart and prudent thing to do from a business perspective, and very, very cost effective. On the seismic, I think immediate occupancy is the way to go. It's necessary for, we'll need it for city operations. While it's not going to be our EOC, or Emergency Operations Center, it will be a center of activity potentially for years. So a central facility, yes. From a business perspective, you would want to protect our investment. If we're going to spend a bunch of money on this building, you don't want to, after an earthquake, bulldoze it. You want to be able to go back and fix it. So adding a little bit of insurance policy, when we were talking about before, was maybe $1 million more. Basically we're self-insured, aren't we? So we don't get anything. We just have to start over. So, and it's 20% of the structural cost, not 20% of the total cost. So that's a completely different number. So that's an easy, cheap insurance policy that we should definitely invest in.
Okay. Betty?
Thank you. Yeah, obviously we should consider sustainability. I didn't say that the first time. But when you talk about rentable floors, why would they be rentable? We should bring the offices that are scattered all over downtown back to a central place. And I think we need more space for our offices that are all over. I don't know where all they are now, but things should be convenient for the public and convenient for staff too. I think eventually we should find a way to get some of if the county vacates some buildings, it's perfect to have just across the street, but not blocks away. I think first we should think what is good for the city before we think about the money. As for the $9 million for parking, we're talking about $9 million for a quiet zone, which is not essential. There are places that we're spending money that maybe we don't have to. I don't think we have to do something with the park blocks. They're fine as they are. We need restrooms, but we don't need to redo the park blocks. Just let the trees grow, the grass grow. But I do think that you think about what you want, and then you think about how do you get the money. And you do want to do it. Well, I'm reminded of when I bought a refrigerator many years ago, and I wanted an automatic defrost, but I saved $30, and I used that refrigerator for 20 years, and had to clean up the drippings for all those years. And I realized it would have been much better to buy the better one in the beginning, and I think to buy what you want in the beginning makes sense, and to find a way to do it. Thank you.
Jennifer?
Thank you. So I may have misunderstood what Claire said, but I don't think she was saying we don't want to do sustainable things. I think what she was saying was, what's the cost of getting certified LEED? Like, can we do these things without going through their process, and will that save us money? Like, I don't need a brag sticker, right? I just want to do the things that are going to be the best decision sustainably. And if we can do that much cheaper without going through the certification program, then maybe we should consider that. Now, if it's a wash and it's kind of the same, then fine. Like, it's nice to be able to say that you did the LEED thing. But if there's a big difference like that, I think that should be on the table, and it's something we should consider.
It's how you build it.
That's
Okay. Mike and then Claire for third round.
Thank you, Mayor. It's how you build that matters, and that's where the money is. And I'm going to hesitate to say it one more time, but if we build to the same standards, which is kind of where the majority of people are right now, except for considering making it more quake safe, in other words, spending more than we did before. Alan just said, and he's right, that the last design at 30,000 square feet cost about $900 a square foot. So I'm asking you guys, if we build the exact same space with the exact same values, you're telling me it's not going to cost $1,200 to $1,300 a square foot? The construction costs haven't gone up over those years 30, 40, 50%? Yes? No?
I can tell you what the numbers that I've shared at this table before, and then either of you can comment on that. The numbers from 2016, the last time we did a budget, worked out to about $800 a square foot, give or take. And we have estimated a 25% escalation from 2016 to 2020 construction. And so that would put it at about $1,000 a square foot.
25% though being the key number, and if we had 28 million for 30,000 square foot, then that's at least 7 million more, right? If my math is correct.
Yes.
And that's 35 million. If we increase the earthquake resiliency, we're getting closer to $40 million. And I'm telling you, I don't think we have it. And the issue around phase 2 is that, yeah, maybe we buy the county, but we've already been told we've got to gut it right down to just the metal beams and start again. And that's $60 or $70 million. Wells Fargo's the same thing. So we're not going to have a phase 2 building. We can't afford it. And we should be honest about it. We can't afford to do a phase 2 in this way. And if so, great, let's plan it. But I don't think the community would accept the price tag of what either of those things would cost. We're just kind of saying it and hoping it can come true. There's one piece of information we didn't talk about here, though, and I agree with the above-ground parking piece. But if we don't build parking around this, I think the community won't accept that option. The county's lot is closer than any of those within that sphere that I saw. And as I understand it from Otto, that was designed to have 2 or 3 stories on top of it or more. Am I correct about that?
About the Umpqua Bank, that the
The
parking lot in the county,
county's
right.
below-ground parking structure was originally designed to have at least 3 stories on top of it. It was designed to bear the weight, right? Because that should be, in my opinion, the first thing we talk about is a joint partnership with the county about how to build more above-ground parking down here if we're going to have that. But I think unless we're willing to set a number and say, no matter what our values are, we're not going above this number because we know we can afford it or something close to it, we're going to end up in the same circular argument for the longest period of time because there's no clarity around what a majority of us want, and we have to agree out front to constrict ourselves somehow in this decision process, or we're never getting there. I still think that 16 million for that other building over there, plus make it look nice, and we can do it with Riverfront Urban Renewal money. We could use the other money we already have for a new jail or for a homeless center. I'm just saying. Thank you.
Okay, Claire.
Except I think they want 22 million for their building.
They want
27. So they probably won't accept our 16 million even if we had it. So thank you, Jennifer, for, yes, I absolutely want our building to incorporate sustainable design. I recognize that that's a cost, but in many ways, a cost that's worth the expense. I like Betty's analogy of getting the cheaper refrigerator and using it for 30 years and wishing she spent that extra $30. But if we haven't revisited the use of LEED in 20 years, I question that. I mean, there are other programs out there, and, I think it would be worth our time as a council to just investigate. We might land with the same policy and want that certification, but I'm not certain why it's an untouchable discussion to look at what the other green building certification programs are out there, because I know that LEED is expensive. And, you know, that prior design that we're referring to, one of the things I remembered about it had this very high-tech glass skin of some kind, and other design elements that were very cool and very appealing and very expensive. And I have to think that we can reach a sustainable building that doesn't have to go that route. And so that I think would reflect our values and try to keep us within a budget that the community could understand. Absolutely, increasing the seismic resiliency will increase the cost, but again, that's an upfront investment to keep and maintain an asset that won't then be completely destroyed in the earthquake that's going to occur. And I see that as a prudent use of public dollars rather than a wasteful use. But I also would like to ask staff to provide us with some ideas when we come back to this topic about where additional money might come from. What are some options we might explore, whether that's a bond, whether that's urban renewal, whether that's some other potential item, because I mean, I agree with Councilor Clark. This is going to have a price tag that's beyond what we have in our savings account right now. And we need to be as responsible and upfront and honest about that with the public as we're able.
So at you're asking for that as part of the next work session in early January?
I am.
Just possible funding sources, okay.
Chris?
Yeah, I would reinforce that. We need to at least know where we could go to get additional money, and I agree. The building that we talked about before, it had a lot of expensive additional things in there that were a reflection of the values we talked about at the time. But it was on that piece of land, and we're not talking about building on that piece of land. And we talked several years ago about the fact it was going to require a redesign in order to build. So while I still think the values conversation is a useful one, I'm not expecting to build exactly the same building there that we were talking about building there, because we simply can't do it. The amount of square footage may be similar, but it's going to be a different building. Now, I don't think there's only one way to achieve values. One of the values we had was accessibility to the public. Well, there's not just one way to be accessible to the public. There's many ways you can be accessible to the public. Some are expensive and some are inexpensive. Just where you locate the doors could be a good way to make things accessible. Does it have to be built out of all glass in order to be accessible? Not necessarily. I can be very comfortable with us being able to achieve a number of our values in a more economical way. I do remember also the previous design, and while they did a great job of incorporating the values that we had talked about, it was in a very expensive way. I don't have to have those values expressed quite to that cost. I think there's other creative ways you can meet those same values that don't have to cost that much. And I think that will be part of the challenge that we will expect our designers to do, is to be able to find ways to meet as much as possible those values, but in a cost-effective and affordable way. And I don't see those as being exclusive. I just see that as an exercise in figuring out how to get there. But I do agree we need to at least know what the ballpark is for the money that we have. I do not want to go, as Mike very appropriately points out, I don't want to go down a discussion about the wish list without knowing how much money's in my bank account. And so at the very next work session, I really agree we should at least know what we have access to in terms of what are the options for raising money, coming up with the money that we could use to build with. And once we have just a general sense of what we have to work with, we can then challenge our designers to say, okay, how can you meet our values? How can you make this building what the community wants within the scope of the money, just even in the general terms that we have available to spend? Nobody wants to go to a full-fledged, tell me, what's the most expensive thing you could have. I don't want to be constrained necessarily to the degree where you say, I got $5, I can't go $1 over $5. But I do need to know at least how much money I have, or at least have access to. What are the sources I could go to get money?
Okay, Alan?
Yeah, I would just add my voice to the chorus of folks asking for the funding options. And that's doable in the next January? Okay. So I'd certainly like to see that. Actually, around the table, we came to a lot of agreement around many of these questions. So I think some of them are dot questions and everybody agrees. But I think we're actually in a lot better place than people think we are, because I think we have a lot of answers to these already by what people have said. So I think by the time we get back to January, this will be a more informed decision. But as well as the funding options, could we also get the environmental sustainability potential costs and potential benefits over operating costs associated with that? Because it's only half a question is what it costs. It also saves energy. LEED certification is expensive, but it's not millions of dollars. It has a price tag to it that people gladly pay. So it's not out of the ballpark of what is doable. You can have a completely sustainable building and not be certified. So that doesn't bother me. It's not that expensive anyway. And then maybe the cost estimate on the seismic standards going from, what do we call it, life safety to immediate occupancy essential facility, and maybe a rundown of how we would pay for a new building since we're self-insured, we'd have to basically start over.
Yeah, I had written down on my list to follow up on kind of what our risk and insurance policies are on something like that, so that we would include that. I think that it would be possible to give you, I'm going out on a limb here, some kind of like big, like this is $2 symbols versus $4 symbols, but I think the level of information you're asking about around the LEED and sustainability piece, those, depending on which choices we make, that I don't think that's going to be possible by mid-January, and other than like maybe scale of, like if you go with life safety, it's this much versus this much. I think we can work on how we can provide as much as possible, but that's a pretty big lift with the holidays ahead of us.
Okay, Betty, and then Mike wants one more.
Okay, we could look for a philanthropist. And we could sell wall plaques or floor plaques or something with names on them, and suggest that people give them for baby gifts and wedding gifts and
Retirement
birthday gifts.
I'll get my name on that.
And go to the funeral homes and ask them if they would, I mean, say, instead of buying an expensive coffin, how about giving a memory thing for the city hall? But it does, people do buy things with their names on, to put a friend's name on them, a friend's or a relative's name. Thank you.
Okay, Mike, one more round here.
The Eugene Pennzoil City Hall.
Agenda items.
One of the things I would ask is if you're going to bring back relative cost information, as Alan has just asked for, I agree, it's always good to have more information, but let's please make it geographically specific. And by that, I mean all this conversation about how operational cost savings is so huge, if you'll invest a little bit more in the sustainability aspects up front, is true in most parts of the country. But not here, where power costs next to nothing comparatively. And the huge capital outlays don't save as much money here locally, where there's a fairly large-scale difference in the cost of power, and it's so much less expensive. So I hope that those considerations will be done with accurate local information that we'd have to endure rather than some national average. Thank you. Oh, actually, one other thing, as long as I still have it here. Sorry, I had like 3 different things that I wanted to say, and nope, I'm done. Thank you.
Okay,
All right, since you have 4 minutes left, I just want to tell you what I think we're bringing back.
perfect.
Okay.
Perfect. Yeah.
So this list of decisions for you to make motions on and decide, some information on our risk policies and how we insure buildings. What is our LEED policy and how have we been building for 20 years? And is that something, what is the wording around that, I think? And potential funding options should the project be more than what you anticipate. And then, if we can do it to the greatest extent possible, some relative costs around some of these items with geographic specificity.
And I had
That's
asked,
a big lift.
I'd asked for other certification, sustainable building program information.
Yeah, I was kind of including that, so thank you.
Yeah, I actually want to thank you all. I think this was so well prepared for us. It enabled us to have a pretty focused conversation, and I'm happy that the council seemed to more or less have kind of the same take on those answers to those questions. So thank you very much. Well done, and thank you all. And we're done a few minutes early, so good. We're adjourned until 7:30.